Ilium stood in the doorway like a guard blocking my path home. His arms were crossed tight, jaw set hard. Behind him, Annabelle held her phone up, recording everything with that satisfied smile I'd grown to hate. "Take everything that's yours and get out," he said. The words hit me like cold water. This was my son. The boy I'd raised alone after his father left. The man I'd helped buy this very house with my life savings. I kept my voice steady even though my hands shook. "All right, Ilium. I'll take everything that's mine." I walked past him into the hall and opened the closet. My fingers wrapped around the handle of my fireproof box, the one with all my important papers inside. Including the promissory note he'd forgotten about. Annabelle laughed as I loaded my grandmother's cedar chest into my car. Finally, she whispered to someone on the phone. A neighbor across the street pretended to water her plants while watching the whole show. I drove away with my trunk full of things I'd paid for. But what they didn't know was that everything that's mine was much more than furniture. It was about to destroy their perfect little world. The motel room smelled like cleaning spray and old carpet. I sat on the scratchy bedspread and opened my fireproof box with trembling fingers. Inside were papers that would change everything if I had the courage to use them. "My name is Heidi Lynn," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm 67 years old, and I'm a retired school secretary." I spread the documents across the bed like a hand of cards. The promissory note. Copies of receipts. The recorded lien on their house. My handwriting looked shaky on the note, but the signatures were clear. Ilium's signature right next to mine. Witnessed by a notary. Legal and binding. $48,000 I'd given them for their down payment. Not a gift like they wanted everyone to believe. A loan. I remembered the day I'd insisted we write it all down properly. Annabelle had rolled her eyes. Ilium had said, "Mom, we're family. We don't need papers." But I'd learned long ago that promises keep roofs standing only when they're nailed down with documentation. The papers were perfect. Every receipt organized by date. Every payment tracked. I'd been thorough because 30 years as a school secretary taught me that details matter. Now those details were about to matter more than ever. 6 months earlier, I'd walked into the bank with butterflies in my stomach. The cashier's check felt heavy in my purse, $48,000 from selling my little condo. Everything I owned in the world turned into one piece of paper. Ilium had been so excited when I called about helping with their down payment. "Mom, you're amazing. This house is perfect for raising kids. And there's an in-law suite just for you." His voice had cracked with emotion. "You'll always have a home with us." At the lawyer's office, I'd placed the check on the table. Annabelle called it family equity. She painted pictures of Sunday dinners and birthday parties in the backyard. Me rocking my future grandchildren to sleep. But when the lawyer started talking about gift taxes, I stopped him. "No, this needs to be a loan. With proper paperwork." Ilium looked confused. Annabelle's smile faltered. "Mom, we're family," Ilium had said. "You don't trust us?" "I trust you completely," I'd replied. "That's why this will be easy to pay back." The notary stamped everything official. I kept my copy in the fireproof box, just like I kept everything else important. Within a week, I'd moved into their in-law suite, believing I'd found my forever home. The first crack in paradise appeared the day I finished unpacking. Annabelle knocked on my door holding a stack of towels. "Guest towels," she announced, placing them on my bed. "These are for you to use." I laughed, thinking it was thoughtful. "Thank you, honey. Though I'm not really a guest anymore, am I?" Her smile tightened just a little. "Also, could you avoid cooking with strong spices? They linger, and we have company coming." I wanted to keep the peace, so I nodded. That weekend, I baked her favorite chocolate cake from scratch. The same recipe I'd made for Ilium's birthdays growing up. She took a big bite and closed her eyes. "This is incredible, Heidi. You're so talented." I glowed with pride. Maybe we'd find our rhythm after all. The next morning, I went to make coffee and found a combination lock on the pantry door. "Oh, that," Annabelle said when I asked. "We're trying to eat healthier. Portion control, you know?" She patted my shoulder. "Don't worry. I'll make your meals." I stood there holding my empty coffee mug, feeling like a stranger in what was supposed to be my home. Through the window, I saw Eliam loading boxes into his car. When I asked what he was doing, he said they were thinking about refinancing. Once the dust settles from the move. The house had thin walls and old vents that carried voices like whispers through a tunnel. I'd been living there 2 months when I heard them talking late one night. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices drifted up from the kitchen below my bedroom. "Once we refinance, we can nudge her out," Annabelle said. Her voice was different when she thought I couldn't hear. Sharper. More calculating. "Get our equity back and have our space again." "She won't make it hard," Eliam replied. "She's soft. Always has been." A chair scraped across the floor. "Besides, where else would she go? We're doing her a favor." I sat up in bed, my heart hammering. The boy I'd raised was talking about me like I was a problem to solve. Like the loan I'd given them was just money they were owed. I reached for my phone and started photographing every receipt I had. Every bank statement, every record of what I'd paid for in their house. The backup power system I'd bought after their third power outage. The router for internet service under my name. The furniture I'd contributed. The car insurance I'd helped with. If they wanted to play games with documentation, I'd show them how a school secretary keeps records. By morning, everything was organized in digital folders with dates and timestamps. I waited until breakfast to bring up the loan. Eliam was reading something on his phone while Annabelle scrambled eggs. I set my coffee down carefully and cleared my throat. "I wanted to talk about our agreement," I said. "The promissory note we signed. When should we discuss the payment schedule?" Eliam looked up, annoyed. "Mom, you're stressing Annabelle out with money talk." He reached over and patted Annabelle's hand. "She's got enough to worry about with the baby coming." Annabelle turned around, spatula in hand. Her smile was all teeth. "Heidi, honey, don't worry about adult things like that. Just focus on being a good nana when the time comes." She patted my hand too hard, fingers pressing into my wrist. After breakfast, I went to my room and found the digital copy of our signed agreement. I sent it to Eliam in a text message with a simple note, just so we're all on the same page. 2 blue checkmarks appeared immediately, showing he'd read it. He never replied. That afternoon, a man in a suit came to look at the house. I heard Annabelle on the phone scheduling an appraisal. For the refinance, she told someone. We should have this wrapped up within the month. Nobody had asked me about refinancing the house I held a lien on. When the appraiser knocked on the door 3 days later, I made sure I was the one who answered it. "Good morning," I said brightly. "You're here about the refinance?" He was a pleasant man with a clipboard and measuring tape. As I showed him around, I mentioned casually, "You should know there's a recorded lien on this property. $48,000. Will that affect the appraisal?" His pen stopped moving. "A lien?" He flipped through his papers. "That wasn't mentioned in my paperwork." "Oh, I'm sure it's just an oversight," I said sweetly. "The loan was properly recorded when they bought the house. I can give you the recording information if you'd like." I watched him take notes, writing down numbers and dates. His expression grew more serious as he worked. When Annabelle came home an hour later, she found him packing up his equipment much faster than expected. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Just need to verify some information with the lender," he said. "Someone will be in touch." Within a week, their refinance application was put on hold. The mortgage company wanted clarification about the existing lien before they could proceed. I watched from my bedroom window as Annabelle paced in the backyard, talking angrily on her phone. Annabelle cornered me in the kitchen the next evening. Her eyes were bright with anger, but her voice stayed carefully controlled. "You're using money to control us," she said. "That's emotional manipulation." I was making tea when she started. My hand stayed steady as I poured hot water over the bag. "I'm not controlling anything. I just want to be paid back as we agreed. You gave us that money as family." She stepped closer, voice rising. "Now you're trying to destroy our future with legal nonsense." My teacup was warm in my hands. I took a small sip before answering. "Promises aren't cages, Annabelle. They're agreements between people who care about each other." She knocked the cup from my hands. It shattered on the kitchen floor, tea spreading across the tiles like a brown stain. I looked down at my grandmother's china cup, the one with tiny roses painted around the rim. "Now in pieces. Clean that up," she snapped. "And stop pretending you're some victim here." I got paper towels and cleaned up every shard while she watched. When I was done, I looked up at her. "I'll replace the cup," I said quietly. It was mine anyway. That night, I heard her on the phone again. "We need documentation," she told someone. "Every little incident. Build a case that she's unstable." The next morning, one of my drinking glasses was missing. I'd brought a set of 6 from my condo, and now there were only 5. When I asked Annabelle about it, she frowned with concern. "Are you feeling all right, Heidi? You've seemed confused lately." She touched my forehead like checking for fever. "Maybe you broke it and forgot?" Eliam was eating cereal at the counter. "Mom, you did seem scattered yesterday. After you dropped that teacup." "I didn't drop it," I said. Annabelle knocked it from my hands. They exchanged a look. The kind couples share when they think someone is losing their mind. "Honey," Annabelle said gently, "I wasn't even in the kitchen when that happened. I went to take out the trash later and found my missing glass wrapped in paper towels that smelled like Annabelle's perfume. I photographed it exactly where it lay, then took it to my room. The scent was definitely her lavender body spray. I sent the photos to my email account with a timestamp. If they wanted to play games with my memory, I'd show them how good my documentation really was." That evening, Annabelle presented me with a printed list. "Family rules," she announced. "Just to keep everyone comfortable. One rule said I couldn't use the kitchen after 7 p.m. Another said I needed permission before having guests. They called it a family meeting, but it felt more like a trial." Annabelle had printed multiple copies of her rules and placed them neatly on the dining room table. Eliam sat beside her, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. "We all want harmony," Annabelle said, sliding a pen across the table toward me. "These guidelines will help everyone know what's expected." I picked up the paper and read through the rules. I couldn't cook certain foods. I couldn't have visitors without approval. I needed to ask permission before using the washing machine. I had to keep common areas visitor ready at all times. "What happens if I don't sign this?" I asked. Annabelle's smile tightened. "Well, we'd have to reconsider the living arrangement." I set down the pen and reached into my purse. I pulled out a copy of our promissory note and placed it on the table next to their rules. "Before I sign anything new, let's talk about this old agreement first." Eliam stared at the paper like it might bite him. "Mom, that's not the same thing." "You're right," I said. "This one is legally binding." I gathered their unsigned rules and handed them back. "I need time to think about your proposal." The next morning, my key card stopped working on the front door. When I asked Eliam about it, he said they'd had problems with the system. "Just knock when you need in," he said. "We're always home." I discovered the padlock on the pantry the hard way. I'd gone to make lunch and found my groceries, the ones I'd bought and labeled with my name, had vanished. In their place was a combination lock hanging from the cabinet door. "You're a guest here," Annabelle reminded me when I asked about my food. "Guests don't need pantry access." That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store and bought a small but sturdy lock for my bedroom door. I also bought a mini refrigerator and a hot plate. If I was going to be treated like a stranger, I'd prepare accordingly. I moved my fireproof box inside my locked room, along with my important papers and any valuables I cared about. My grandmother's jewelry. The few family photos I'd brought from my condo. The emergency cash I kept for unexpected expenses. From my window, I watched Annabelle on the phone in the backyard. She was gesturing wildly, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch fragments. Impossible to live with, she said. Paranoid behavior. Getting worse every day. I plugged in my mini fridge and made a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. If they wanted to document my concerning behavior, I'd make sure my actual important behavior stayed private and secure. The lock clicked satisfyingly when I tested it. Some things were still mine, even in a house that no longer felt like home. The explosion came on a Tuesday morning. I'd been humming while folding laundry in my room when Annabelle burst through my door without knocking. Her face was red, eyes wild. "You scared the baby," she shouted, even though her baby wasn't due for months. "Your singing woke him up." I looked around my empty room, confused. "What baby?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "You were being deliberately loud and disruptive." Ilium appeared behind her, looking tired and frustrated. "Mom, we've asked you repeatedly to be considerate." I was folding clothes and humming quietly, I said. In my own room. With the door closed. "That's not what happened," Annabelle said firmly. "You were stomping around and singing at the top of your lungs. Admit it." I stared at my son, waiting for him to remember who I was. The woman who'd worked 2 jobs to keep him in school. Who'd sat by his bedside when he had pneumonia. Who'd taught him that lying was wrong. "I won't confess to things I didn't do," I said quietly. Ilium's face went hard. "Then you need to leave." His voice cracked on the words, but he said them anyway. "Take everything that's yours and get out." I moved methodically, like I was closing down a classroom at the end of the school year. Everything had its place, its purpose, its proper inventory. They wanted me to take what was mine. I'd take exactly that. The cedar chest went first, my grandmother's, with her initials carved into the lid. Then the rocking chair I'd bought for late-night feedings when Ilium was small. The backup power system I'd installed after their 3rd blackout. The router providing internet service under my account. Annabelle filmed me from the doorway. "For our protection," she announced loudly. The neighbors were getting quite a show. I loaded my paid-for furniture piece by piece. The coffee table I'd contributed to their living room. The bookshelf holding my novels. The small television I'd put in the kitchen. My car, titled in my name, insured under my policy, maintained with my money. By the time I finished, their living room looked like it had been robbed. Which, in a way, it had been by them, when they assumed everything I owned became theirs by default. I drove away with my trunk full and my conscience clear. The house behind me looked strangely empty without my things filling the spaces. Like a stage set with half the props removed. The bank was my first stop. I sat across from a young representative who typed while I explained what I needed. "I want to remove 2 people from my credit card account," I said, sliding the paperwork across her desk. She looked surprised when she saw the account balance. "Are you sure? This is a significant change." "I'm very sure." Next was the phone company. Ilium and Annabelle had been on my family plan for 3 years. "I'd like to return to an individual account," I told the representative. "Remove the other 2 lines immediately." The insurance company was equally efficient. "Cancel the renter's policy for the address on file," I instructed. I purchased it for tenants who were no longer my responsibility. Each phone call felt like cutting a rope. By evening, they'd lost their credit card access, their phone service, their insurance coverage. All things I'd been paying for while they treated me like an unwelcome guest. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney, Pilar Cruz. I'd emailed her that morning while packing my car. Her reply was short and professional: "Reviewed your documents. Everything is solid." Are you ready to enforce the note? I typed back, yes. Pilar's demand letter was a work of art. Professional, respectful, but absolutely clear about what was owed and when. $48,000 plus reasonable interest. 30 days to respond with a payment plan or full payment. The letter arrived at their house by certified mail on a Wednesday. I knew because the tracking number showed it was delivered at 2:17 p.m. Ilium must have signed for it himself. His response came 3 hours later, a thumbs-up emoji texted to my phone. Nothing else. No call, no plan, no acknowledgement of the legal document he'd just received. Just an emoji, like I'd reminded him to pick up milk. I screenshot the text and forwarded it to Pilar. Professional response, I wrote. That evening, Annabelle posted on social media a photo of her and Ilium smiling in their kitchen, with a caption about boundaries being beautiful and toxic people removing themselves. The post got dozens of likes from friends who had no idea what was really happening. I didn't respond or comment. I just saved a screenshot for my files. When the 30-day deadline passed without any real communication, Pilar filed the notice of default. The next phase was about to begin, and it wouldn't be handled through emoji and social media posts. The legal notice appeared on their front door like a pale envelope of reckoning. I wasn't there to see it delivered, but I heard about the aftermath from my friend Dolores, who lived 2 streets over and had connections everywhere. Annabelle spotted it first during her morning jog. According to Dolores, she'd ripped it down and thrown it into the bushes, looking around frantically to see if any neighbors had witnessed the delivery. But legal notices don't disappear just because you hide them. The bank received their copy electronically. Their refinancing application, already stalled by Mylene, was now completely dead. The mortgage company sent their own letter explaining that they couldn't proceed with any new lending while the property was in default. The kitchen remodel they'd been planning hit another snag when their deposit check bounced. Without the refinance money they'd been counting on, their checking account couldn't cover the contractor's advance payment. I learned about their financial troubles through the neighborhood network of retired teachers and secretaries who somehow knew everything that happened within a 6-block radius. They were struggling with bills that had always been manageable when they had my contribution to the household budget. That evening, my phone rang. Ilium's name appeared on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. When I did, his voice sounded smaller than I'd heard it since he was 12. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where neither of us held an advantage. Ilium looked older than his 34 years, with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. Mom, he started, then stopped. This is getting out of hand. I sipped my coffee and waited. I'd learned that silence often said more than words. We need a few months, he continued. Just to get back on our feet. Maybe we could work out a payment plan? His phone buzzed on the table. A text from Annabelle flashed on the screen, don't cave. I slid a folder across the table. Inside was Pilar's proposal, reduced interest, extended timeline, reasonable monthly payments. There's one condition, I said. A public apology acknowledging that the money was a loan, not a gift. And an admission that you treated me unfairly. Ilium stared at the papers. I could see him wrestling with his pride, weighing his options. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Annabelle, though I couldn't read this one. I need to think about it, he said finally. Take your time, I replied. But the legal process continues while you're thinking. He left the folder on the table and walked away. I sat there finishing my coffee, watching through the window as he sat in his car for 10 minutes before driving away. The power outage came 3 weeks later during a severe thunderstorm. Old trees fell across power lines throughout the neighborhood, leaving most houses dark and cold. Most houses, but not all. Before I'd moved out, I'd installed a backup power system for their home. A substantial battery bank and an inverter that could keep essential systems running during outages. It had cost me $4,000, but it meant security during storms like this. Without that system, Ilium's home office went dark in the middle of a crucial video call with a potential client. His laptop died, his internet failed, and he lost a contract worth $30,000 to a competitor who managed to stay connected. He texted me at midnight, "We're bleeding money, Mom." I read the message twice before responding, "I'm sorry to hear that." The next day, he reached out to a realtor about selling the house. It seemed like a reasonable solution: sell the property, pay off my lien, take whatever equity remained and start fresh somewhere smaller. But when the realtor ran the preliminary title search, she found my recorded lien and called me directly. "Mrs. Heidi Lynn? I need to discuss the terms of your agreement before we can list this property." I explained the situation professionally. The realtor called Iliam back within an hour. "We have complications," she told him. The listing was quietly withdrawn. The for sale sign that appeared in their yard lasted exactly one day. I drove by Tuesday evening and saw it planted hopefully in the front lawn. By Wednesday afternoon, it was gone. Dolores filled me in on the drama. "The realtor tried to list it, but there's some kind of legal problem," she said over tea in my motel room. Now Annabelle's parents have driven up from Phoenix, and they're furious. I could imagine that conversation. Annabelle's mother had never liked me, always thought I was too involved in Iliam's life. Now she probably saw this as proof that I was a manipulative old woman destroying her daughter's happiness. They went straight to the police station to file a complaint. According to their story, I'd stolen furniture and appliances from their house. The officers took the report seriously until I showed up with my receipts. "Ma'am, do you have proof of ownership for these items?" the sergeant asked. I opened my folder. Purchase receipts with my name and credit card. Serial numbers photographed and documented. Even photos of the items in my original condo before I'd moved them to their house. The complaint was closed within an hour. "These belong to her," the officer explained to Annabelle's parents. "She has every right to take her own property." But the humiliation of being wrong didn't stop them from making threats. They were going to sue me, they said. Ruin my reputation. Make me pay for destroying their family. Pilar scheduled mediation as a final attempt at resolution. "It's cheaper for everyone," she explained. "And it gives them one last chance to settle this reasonably." We met in a sterile conference room downtown. Iliam sat across from me looking defeated, while Annabelle perched beside him with her jaw set and her arms crossed. Her parents flanked her like bodyguards. "I'm willing to forgive half the debt," I began, "if we can reach an agreement that includes basic respect and acknowledgement of the truth." Iliam leaned forward. For a moment, I thought I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who understood right from wrong. But before he could speak, Annabelle cut him off. "That money was a gift," she declared. "Family helping family. This whole loan story is something she made up later to control us." I slid copies of the notarized promissory note across the table. "Your signatures are right here." Coerced, Annabelle's mother interjected. "You manipulated them into signing under duress." The mediator looked uncomfortable. "The documentation appears quite clear," he said diplomatically. We sat in that sterile room for 3 hours, getting nowhere. Every compromise I offered was met with denial, deflection, or demands that I apologize to them. By the end, even the mediator looked frustrated. Pilar circled a date on her calendar and showed it to me. "Foreclosure auction," she whispered. 6 weeks. My grandson's birthday fell on a Tuesday in October. He was turning 8, and I'd already bought his present weeks earlier, a science kit with real microscope slides and a beginner's chemistry set. The kind of gift that would have made Iliam's eyes light up at that age. I couldn't bring myself to knock on their door, not with everything that had happened. Instead, I dropped the wrapped gift at his school office with a note, "For Tommy, with love from Nana. Happy birthday." The secretary promised to make sure he got it, and I drove away feeling both proud and heartbroken. I was missing his birthday party, but I wasn't going to let this legal mess rob him of knowing he was loved. That night, my phone rang. Iliam's name on the screen, calling at 10:47 p.m. His voice was thick with tears when I answered. "Mom," he said, and then couldn't seem to find more words. I could hear him crying, taking shaky breaths. "I never wanted it to be like this." "I know, sweetheart," I said softly. "It doesn't have to be." But he never said the words I needed to hear. Never acknowledged what he'd done or apologized for how he'd treated me. Just tears and regret without responsibility. The auction notice was posted the next day. The auction was held on the courthouse steps on a crisp November morning. A small crowd gathered: investors, curious neighbors, and a few people like me who had personal stakes in the outcome. I stood with Pilar, my hands folded and my heart braced for whatever would come. Across the crowd, I saw Eliam and Annabelle huddled together near their car. They looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by months of legal pressure and financial strain. The auctioneer's voice carried across the parking lot as he described the property and read the legal terms. When bidding opened, several investors raised their hands. The price climbed quickly. This was a desirable neighborhood with good schools and rising property values. The final bid came in at $96,000. After the auctioneer's fees and other costs, my lien was paid in full first, as legally required. The remaining amount, less than $8,000, went to Eliam and Annabelle. $8,000 from a house they'd bought for $120,000 with my help. After legal fees and moving expenses, they'd have almost nothing left to start over. I watched them accept the check from the auctioneer's representative. Annabelle was crying now, the reality finally sinking in. They had 30 days to vacate the property they'd thought would be their forever home. I drove past their house on the last day they had to move out. I couldn't help myself, some part of me needed to see how the story ended. Boxes lined the curb like dominoes, filled with the belongings they'd managed to accumulate during their brief homeownership. A broken crib leaned against the mailbox, probably damaged during packing. Their car was loaded so full I could barely see through the rear window. Annabelle stood on the porch, refusing to look in my direction even though I was sure she'd seen my car. Her parents were there, loading a U-Haul truck with grim efficiency. The whole scene looked like a retreat from a battle they'd never expected to lose. Eliam was carrying a final box when he spotted me. He set it down and walked slowly to my car window. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders sagging with defeat. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. The words I'd been waiting months to hear, finally spoken when it was too late to change anything. I reached through the window and touched his hand. "I love you," I said. "I always will. But love doesn't replace a promise." He nodded and walked back to finish loading their truck. I drove away before they pulled out of the driveway. My new cottage had a garden. Not much of one yet. Just a small patch of earth behind a cheerful yellow house with white shutters and room enough for one person to live comfortably. But it had potential, and I had time. I planted basil by the kitchen window, where the morning sun would help it grow strong. On the wall above my small dining table, I framed one document, the final payment statement showing my loan had been satisfied in full. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The cottage came furnished, so I didn't need much. My cedar chest fit perfectly in the bedroom. My rocking chair found a place by the window where I could watch birds visit the feeder I'd hung from the old oak tree. I joined a grief counseling group that met at the community center on Thursday evenings. Not grief for the dead, but for relationships that had died while everyone was still breathing. The counselor, a gentle woman named Patricia, helped me understand that setting boundaries wasn't the same as building walls. "You didn't destroy your family," she said during one session. "You stopped enabling their destructive choices. There's a difference." Some nights I still reached for my phone to call Eliam, forgetting for a moment that everything had changed. But mostly, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace.